Welcome back to our daily Bible study. I am Matthew Gage, pastor at Faith Baptist Church in Decatur, Texas. We're in Genesis chapter number 49 today, Genesis chapter number 49. And this chapter has so much information, a lot of which I just don't have time to get into. I didn't even really pursue a lot of the things preparing to go through this. So many wonderful little details that there are resources available. People have studied this out. I'm going to hit some high points, but I'm just saying I just do not have time to go through in the wonderful detail of the prophetic nature of what is said in this chapter. What is in this chapter is the final words, the final instructions of Jacob, final blessings that he gives to his 12 sons, followed by a charge to bury him in the place where Abraham is his family burial plot. And also then it closes with his death, just in the very last, in fact, basically just the last words of the chapter. So, like I say, the deal we get into in this chapter that we could really get bogged down on, and we could go for perhaps hours tracing and tracking down these details, is Jacob is going to spend time on each of his 12 sons. Now, that does not include Manasseh and Ephraim that we just saw. He just goes with Joseph here. But the 12 brothers, he's going to go through and talk about them. Some of them, it's just a few words. Some of them, it's a few verses. And each one of these, the imagery, the verbs that are used, the adjectives, the pictures that are described are so wonderful that you can trace out not just in the character of these men, but that also of their descendants. And there are things that will follow through, and you can see some fulfillment in when they go after the Exodus and the children of Israel reclaim the promised land. Some of it's fulfilled then. Other parts of it could be fulfilled in the times of the kingdom. There's just so many things here. And then there's even some end times type prophecy in here. So this is Jacob as a man of faith. Even though he has failing eyesight, he's looking into the future. God is revealing some things to him, and there is, like I said, just prophetic things in this that we don't have time to track down all the details. So I'm just trying to lay that as a groundwork. If you say, well, why didn't you spend much more time on Gad or Asher or Naphtali? I just don't have time to trace down some of these things. I'm just going to give you some high points, and that's mainly going to be like on the tribe of Judah, and when we get down to Joseph and a few others along the way. So let's just jump right on in, chapter number 49 and verse number 1. And Jacob called unto his sons and said, gather yourselves together that I may tell you that which shall befall you in the last days. So even he's saying this is prophetic. I'm going to reveal to you some things. So in this sense, Jacob is a prophet. So that's an interesting deal. Also further development of his character from being the trickster, the guy trying to help God out, to being the guy now saying, I'm going to tell you what God is going to do in the future. Verse 2. Gather yourselves together and hear, ye sons of Jacob, and hearken unto Israel your father. Now, I like that different. We talk about Jacob and Israel, they can be used interchangeably, talking about the same man. But I think in this case, there is a significance there. Jacob kind of being the old man, Israel, the spiritual man that he becomes. And he's saying, you were born out of the old man, out of Jacob, the trickster, the supplanter, the man who took things in his own hands. But listen now to the words that the man who is a prince with God, the man who has found faith and learned to trust in God. Listen to what he says. Verse 3, we start with the eldest. Reuben, thou art my firstborn, my might, and the beginning of my strength, the excellency of dignity, and the excellency of power. So it sounds pretty good right there. Verse 3, verse 4. Unstable as water, thou shalt not excel, because thou wentest up to thy father's bed, thou defiledst thou it. He went up to my couch. So it starts out, sounds pretty good. Reuben, look how strong you are, but you're unstable as water. Just that picture of how water, just you put something on it, it sinks. You put it in a cup and you slosh it around, the movement, the uncertainty of it. Looking at a sea, being boisterous with waves, just the instability of that. Says that's who you are. And he points out here defiling the father's bed, and I think all the stuff with the couch, there's some imagery things in there. That goes back to chapter 35, verse number 22. Got some notes over here if you see me looking. Where he went in and had relations with his with one of Jacob's wives, with Bilhah. So that event, and I highlighted that when we went back through that would come up again, and that would cost him that right of the firstborn, that birthright. And here it is being hinted at and saying, well, son, you're powerful, but you're unstable, and your carelessness, your disregard for doing what is right has cost you the birthright. Verse 5, Simeon and Levi. Now it's interesting, he actually puts these two together. Doesn't really do that with anybody else, but he puts these two together. Why? Well, we'll see. Simeon and Levi are brethren. Instruments of cruelty are in their habitations. O my soul, come not thou into their secret, unto their assembly. Mine honor, be not thou united. For in their anger they slew a man, and in their self-will they digged down a wall. Cursed be their anger, for it was fierce, and their wrath, for it was cruel. I will divide them in Jacob and scatter them in Israel. So this is talking about Simeon and Levi. Why are they put together? Well, let's go back to previous events. And the events, well, you'll remember back with the events following the rape of their sister Dinah, and how they tricked the men of Shechem to circumcise themselves, and then in their weakness went in and murdered them, slew them. I think that's the event, and we pointed out at that time that craftiness, that cruelty, those actions cost them their chance at the birthright also. So I think a lot of that is what is being talked about in verses 5 and 6 and 7. Now it talks about being divided and scattered at the end of verse 7. The tribe of Levi, looking forward in time, will be the priestly tribe. They have no set place, land. They have some cities and places, settlements given to them, but they don't have a place, allotment of land given to them like the other tribes, where this is where the tribe of Judah is. This is where the tribe of Asher is. They're not given that. They're spread out throughout the 12 tribes to minister as the priests of God. Simeon is given basically a small allotment inside the allotment of Judah, down by Beersheba, when everything is split up. So he's a tribe within a tribe. It's interesting deal. You can go and you can read that. That is in I've got that over here, Joshua chapter number 19. So you can go read that. So anyway, I think that's what those events are talking about. And by the way, that is chapter 34 Genesis. I missed over my note in that, where the events with Dinah and their cruelty and their machinations come into play. So you can go and read up that chapter number 34 of Genesis, and then some of the fulfillment of that. Like I say, you want to jump ahead, Joshua chapter number 19, you can read about the division that's given to Simeon, which is smaller in, like I say, even inside that of the tribe of Judah's allotment of land. Okay, verse number 8. Judah, thou art he whom thy brethren shall praise. So this preeminence, and like I say, I think he's acknowledging the birthright given to Judah here. Thy hand shall be in the neck of thine enemies. Thy father's children shall bow down before thee. So, he's going to be strong, going to, win in battle, but also a preeminence among his brethren. Verse 9, Judah is a lion's whelp, an offspring, a young lion. From the prey, my son, thou art gone art gone up. He stooped down, he crouched as a lion and as an old lion. Who shall rouse him up? The scepter, now this is all talking about a lion, that picture. By the way, the lion of the tribe of Judah, that's the imagery of Christ. And so here you have some of that first imagery of the lion being associated with Judah. Verse 10, the scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor a lawgiver from between his feet, until Shiloh come, and unto him shall the gathering of the people be. Scepter is that sign of power, of royalty. So it's not going to depart from Judah, saying that Judah is going to be a royal line. And by the way, where does David's line come from? From Judah. Now, it also says until Shiloh come, a proper name there, Shiloh. But what does that name mean? It means kind of tranquility, peace. Picture there of the Prince of Peace, the Messiah. That is a prophecy of the Messiah found in this. The Messiah will come from the tribe of Judah. And the gathering of the people to Judah, to the Messiah, you've got some messianic prophecies at play in here. Verse number 11 and 12. Binding his foal unto the vine, and his ass's colt unto the choice vine, he washed his garments in wine, and his clothes in the blood of grapes. His eyes shall be red with wine, and his teeth white with milk. A couple different ways you can interpret those two verses. They could be referring to Judah, the strength of Judah, the blessings of Judah. A vine is not necessarily something strong enough to tie an animal to. I mean, they're usually pretty easily, they're weak, they break, they'll pull up. So that's not something you would typically ever see used that's strong enough. So it talks about strength. The use of wine there, that's could be seen as blessing. It could be seen as that the multitude of the blessing in there, the richness, that there's so much. It's just like having water. That instead of just washing your clothes in water, we got so much wine. We wash our clothes in it. We drink so much of it. You talk about eating so much it comes out of your ears, or drinking so much it's coming out of your eyeballs. Some of that, I don't know, maybe y'all don't say that. Maybe that's some Texas country sayings, but those kind of sayings I've heard all my life. Well, they're saying, boy, you've got so much, your eyes are turning red, because it's a sign of the blessing. The same thing with the teeth white with milk. That's just the abundance of bounty and blessing in there. You could say that. Also, you could say 11 and 12 are pictures of the Messiah. The foal, the ass's colt, well, what is that with the ministry of Christ? Well, the triumphal entry. What is he riding on? So then talk about the garments and the blood of grapes, or in the garments of wine. Well, wine being a picture of blood. So this could talk about the sacrifice of Christ. It could also talk about the conquering Christ that we see in the book of Revelation when he comes back. So a lot of wonderful things there we could talk about. Like I said, there's so much detail we just don't have time to get into. I'm trying to keep these in that 15-minute range, and sometimes I've got up as high as 30 minutes. Sometimes I'm out in a little less than 10. If we followed all these things through, we would be here all day. There's just such wonderful details. But let's keep going, and we'll get through these next few pretty quick. Verse number 13. Zebulun shall dwell at the haven of the sea, and he shall be for a haven of ships, and his border shall be unto Zidon. That's exactly the allotment of land that he gets. It's in the far north. It's along the coast. It borders those ancient cities, Tyre, Phoenician cities, Tyre and Sidon. So prophetic there of where they'll dwell. Verse 14. Issachar is a strong ass couching between two burdens. And he saw that the rest was good in the land, that it was pleasant, and bowed his shoulder to bear, and became a servant unto tribute. So kind of Issachar's place could be that he's in between. He's in the northern part. So you've got powerful kingdoms to the north. You've got powerful tribes, and also Kingdom of Samaria to the south. His place kind of in between there. Verse 16, Dan shall judge his people as one of the tribes of Israel. So this idea of Dan with being a judge. Now Dan also, that's the very far north. You have the same from Dan to Beersheba. Dan in the far north, Beersheba to the south. But this idea of being a judge, and you can go back and say, well, where does that come out? Well, I'll point out that Samson comes out of the tribe of Dan. So you have maybe some fulfillment there. Where we at? Verse 17. Dan shall be a serpent by the way, an adder in the path that biteth the horse heels, so that his rider shall fall backward. So, what is the character of Dan? Well, he's crafty, he's smart, he lays an ambush, and when the mighty horses picture of war come along, he can snap at them and cause them to stumble and fall and kind of punch above his weight class. I'm not saying that saying very well there, but basically saying that he's stronger than he ought to be through his craftiness. Verse 18 is interesting. There's a little interjection here that Jacob does. He says, I have waited for thy salvation, O Lord. Why interject that in the middle of this? Well, I think in seeing Dan and seeing the trouble, and Dan being, though small, being a power to be reckoned with, I think he's seeing some of the trouble that will come, and seeing that salvation is not through their craftiness or their skill, but salvation comes from the Lord, that the Lord will persevere the children of Israel and protect them. Above their craftiness, God is in control, and I think that is what Jacob is saying there in verse number 18. Verse number 19. Gad, a troop shall overcome him, but he shall overcome at the last. Verse 20. Out of Asher his bread shall be fat, and he shall yield royal dainties. Verse 21. Naphtali is a hind let loose, he giveth goodly words. So these three are just kind of really quick, not as much details given. Like I said, I don't want to spend a lot of time track down all the details here. I'll leave that for your study if you want to dig in there and find some study. Even J. Vernon McGee, I actually have his commentary over here. I was just referencing it. He kind of glosses over some of these and says that he hadn't even really done the study into it, that he knew people that had, and he could refer you to some places, but he doesn't get bogged down in these details either. So if I'm following an example there, I may be following his and kind of skipping over some of this. Verse 22, we get to Joseph. And like I say, we're not going to go through Ephraim and Manasseh that we saw in the previous chapter being adopted as sons. We're looking at Joseph and kind of his life and the blessings that flow through to his children. Verse 22, Joseph is a fruitful bough, even a fruitful bough by a well whose branches run over the wall. So it talks about the blessings, that Joseph is like a great tree planted, secure, bearing fruit, that has a well of water nearby, so not lacking for blessing. The branches reaching over, even though there's a wall like around a garden, its branches go over and its blessings extend beyond himself to other people. Verse 23 talks about some of the trouble that he went through, that God brought him through. The archers have sorely grieved him and shot at him and hated him. I think that kind of talks about his brothers, kind of personally there. Verse 24. But his bow, his bow. We have bows, and now we have a bow. His bow abode in strength, and the arms of his hands were made strong by the hands of the mighty God of Jacob. So where did the blessings and the strength and the overcoming in the days of adversity, where did it come from? Was it because Joseph was a great man? Well, Joseph was a great man, I won't take away, but he pales in comparison to the true source, to the true power that blessed him, that kept him safe, that elevated him, and that was God. So I think that's important there. The mighty God of Jacob. From thence is the shepherd, the stone of Israel. He stops right there and just keeps praising God and lifting up God. Shepherd is a care, the stone, a rock, the surety. So just wonderful, wonderful imagery there that Jacob just can't help but start praising God when he thinks about what God has done in the life of Joseph. Verse 25, even by the God of thy father, who shall help thee, and by the Almighty, who shall bless thee with blessings of heaven above, blessings of the deep that lieth under, blessings of the breast and of the womb. Those two kind of go hand in hand, of offspring, children, those kind of things. Verse 26, the blessings of thy father have prevailed upon the blessings of my progenitors unto the utmost bond of the everlasting hills. They shall be on the head of Joseph, and on the crown of the head of him that was separate from his brethren. So it talks about the blessings on Joseph in his life. And also that plays forward some. You will see Ephraim become a very mighty power in later days of the kingdom. So that could play out even through his children. But my primary interpretation in reading that is I like to look at that as more of this is what God has done in the life of Joseph and will continue to do in the life of Joseph. Verse 27, the last of the sons. Benjamin shall raven as a wolf. In the morning he shall devour the prey, and at night he shall divide the spoil. My goodness, I don't know if I'd want to be lumped in with a wolf, especially this kind of thing, going out to prey and all that kind of stuff. I mean, it can speak of some power and things, but once again, I don't want to get chased down that. You can chase down some of that in the history of the tribe of Benjamin, but we're not going to do that here. Verse 28. All these are the 12 tribes of Israel. And I told you before, the 12 tribes of Israel, that's a kind of a fun thing to study, that list. How many tribes are there? Depends on how and when you're counting. Here he's counting the 12 children, even though later times Joseph's 2 sons will be split out into 2 tribes and Levi won't count. And it's just a fun study. I'll look it up. You can have fun doing that. All these are the 12 tribes of Israel, and this is it that their father spake unto them and blessed them. Every one according to his blessing he blessed them. And he charged them and said unto them, I am to be gathered unto my people. Bury me with my fathers in the cave that is in the field of Ephron the Hittite, in the cave that is in the field of Machpelah, which is before Mamre in the land of Canaan, which Abraham bought with the field of Ephron the Hittite for a possession of a burying place. There they buried Abraham and Sarah his wife. There they buried Isaac and Rebekah his wife, and there I buried Leah. The purchase of the field and of the cave that is therein was from the children of Heth. So in his final things, he's blessed his children, and there's a lot of prophetic foresight in this. But this last command, as he's there in the land of Egypt, I'm assuming in the land of Goshen where they dwelled, and of his 12 sons around him, he has one last request. Says, don't bury me here. I want to be buried with my forefathers, where Abraham and Isaac were my wife. I want to be buried with them. So that's the request that is made in verse 33. And when Jacob had made an end of commanding his sons, he gathered up his feet into the bed and yielded up the ghost and was gathered unto his people. So I imagine him, kind of sitting on the side of, a bed, couch type deal there, and he's got his sons around them, and maybe he's touched each one on the shoulder or head as he's gone through and said all these things. And at last, as he's standing there and, kind of his life maybe giving out, his strength fading, he tasks them with burying him in the burying ground belonging to Abraham. And then he lays down in his bed, and there passes from this life into the next. And I love the phrase, and was gathered unto his people. He's not only, like the scripture says, be absent from the body, is be present with the Lord, not only reunited with that sense of being with God into the next life, but gathered with his people. He's reunited with Abraham, with Isaac, with his forefathers of the faith that had gone on before. So I think that's a wonderful little phrase there, gathered unto his people. So anyway, there we go. That wraps up chapter number 49. Like I said, I know there's a lot of details I couldn't get into. I challenge you to just go in and do some study on that. It's some pretty interesting things when you study out some of those prophecies. But anyway, we finally have here the death of Jacob, the request to have him buried in the burying ground of his family, and we'll get to that in the next chapter as we close out the book of Genesis. So anyway, we'll wrap that up for chapter number 49. I appreciate you watching. I hope it's been a help and a blessing to you.